Awesome. I see we've got a hello, everybody. I see we've got a few people who have already made it in, and I know we're waiting for a few additional participants. So give us a couple of minutes and we will get things underway. Let me know, Marie, when you think we should get going and give it a couple more minutes.
I think we'll give it a minute for everybody to trickle in. And for those of you who are already here, welcome. Please feel welcome to introduce yourself, where you are, and what your role is, whether you're already a practice owner or thinking about practice ownership. Go ahead and share that in the chat. We'd love to see where everybody is joining us from. Thanks for being here.
And maybe in the meantime, I'll just introduce everybody who's on the panel today. First, myself, Ross Aberdeen. I'm one of the regional managers professional banking for TD Bank. I'm located here in Toronto. We have a team of folks right across the country who help medical professionals realize their dreams and offer as much advice and service as we can to help you get there. I'd also like to introduce my counterpart from here in the west side of the GTA, Nancy Patel. She's been over 20 years in the banking industry, a lot of that in retail and commercial banking roles. So she's done the full gamut. Nancy and her team are committed to working with veterinarians and taking the time to understand their business and advising them on tailored solutions throughout their career. In her spare time, Nancy loves to cook and experimenting with vegan food to feed her family and friends. Also like to introduce Sarah Lane, who is also a member here at TD. Sarah is the regional manager for Central Canada for our Women in Enterprise commercial and specialized businesses, part of business banking. Sarah's been with TD since 2007, holding increasingly senior positions through branch banking, the corporate office, and commercial banking. Today, Sarah is the regional manager for Women in Enterprise, supporting commercial and specialized business banking in Central Canada. Sarah developed a passion for this space during her experience in commercial banking, with her own experience as a career woman in a predominantly male industry and as a mother of a young daughter. Sarah feels privileged to have the opportunity to remove barriers for women entrepreneurs and leaders and support this demographic in achieving their biggest aspirations. And last but not least, I want to introduce Dr. Marie Howelchuk. Marie is a certified coach, yoga, and mediation teacher, is dedicated to sharing evidence-based information on mental health and well-being within the veterinary profession, with over 20 years of experience in veterinary practice, including roles in academia and private practice. Marie inspires veterinary professionals to make lasting changes in their lives through workshops, lectures, keynotes, and virtual coaching. She emphasizes effective communication, healthy boundaries, and burnout prevention. Her advocacy has earned her recognition, including Alberta Veterinary Medical Association Communication Award back in 2020 and Alberta Blue Cross Face of Wellness Award just a couple of years back in 2022. So welcome, panelists, and welcome everybody who is joining us today. So what do you think, Marie? Should we get things kicked off?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Awesome. Awesome. So we've had some great responses from everybody who signed up and a broad list of questions that have been put together. So maybe I will throw the first one over to you, Marie. One of the questions that came in, I'm already feeling burnt out and I'm less than 5 years into my career. Could owning my own practice make it worse?
Yeah, such a great question. So, it's one of those situations where the stressors that are involved in practice ownership and in being an associate are different. There's going to be stress no matter what role you have in veterinary medicine. That goes for any person in veterinary medicine, whether you're a veterinarian or not. There is some interesting research out of the US to show that those stressors are uniquely different. And I think we can all imagine, if we were a practice owner, if we are sitting in the seat of associate, what those differences could be. So what some of the AVMA research has shown is that those who are in an associate role only tend to have more stressors around patient care, making mistakes, not really knowing what that person's role is within the practice. Certainly more concerns about financial situations, debt, student debt, that sort of thing, versus the stressors that are more commonly experienced by practice owners tend to be more around managing the practice. So managing the team members. But 10 years ago, when a lot of this research was done, competition with other practices. I think we're in a place in veterinary medicine now where there's more than enough business to go around. So we feel less of that, stress around that competition. But nevertheless, when you own a practice, you're taking on a whole new set of responsibilities that is going to add on some additional stressors, some different stressors, depending on, how well supported you are in that role. So, I never want to discourage anybody from becoming a practice owner. There are definitely a lot of indications that being a practice owner actually has tremendous benefits. And so, where I have seen most people transition into practice ownership from a well-being perspective is when they have a lot of values in congruence with the employers or practice owners that they've been working for. So they feel like they just can't find the right fit, right? Maybe this person values like really high quality medical care or really strong bonds with their clientele, whatever that might look like, and they just can't find a fit in their community that aligns with that. Then opening your own practice is a wonderful opportunity to establish that mission and vision right from the jump and set up those values that that you are aligned with. That is a huge deterrent to burnout, is having that values alignment. So that's oftentimes the transition point that I see people move into from a wellness perspective, that it's just like, I cannot find the right fit. I need to make a change. I'm just not happy. Here's where I can have control over the kind of practice that I want to work in.
Yeah, and I think that was a key thing that came to my mind as well, that sense of control, as stressful as it may be and as hard as it may be, having that control, I think, can be a big factor there as well. Now, that leads really well into the next question. What are the well-being benefits of owning my own practice as opposed to staying an associate the rest of my career?
Yeah, so this is actually new research that's come out that really drew me to this topic and wanting to support independent practice ownership. I come from a family of veterinarians. Both my parents are veterinarians. My mom owned a companion animal practice for more than 40 years. And, I definitely saw the benefits in terms of that autonomy, that control over a person's work is a huge preventer of burnout, right? So when you are in control, when you are the boss, when you are the owner, that definitely offers that sense of control and that, autonomy to make decisions and create the kind of practice you want. I think a lot of that control is what's feeding into research that has come out just recently. I've got the paper actually pulled up here. I'll share the link in the chat when we pause for just a moment here. But this was a paper published in JAVMA in 2022 looking at the benefits of practice ownership among US veterinarians. And what they found is actually lower burnout scores among US veterinarians compared to associates. So there is evidence that this is borne out in lower burnout scores. And in fact, it also translates into higher compassion satisfaction scores. So most of you watching or listening, you've heard of compassion fatigue, right? That sense of, I'm working so hard and I'm caring so much and I'm just exhausted by this caregiving work that I have. A lot of people refer to this as empathy fatigue, right? It's just this overwhelming depletion of empathy that we just can't empathize anymore. A lot of that comes from moral stress. And a lot of that moral stress is created in these situations that we don't have control over, right? Maybe we have a client that comes into the practice and they don't have the money to pay for this. And so if we're an associate, we're kind of like, well, these are the costs. Like, I don't have any other option to give you. If you find yourself in the seat of practice owner, I know a lot of new practice owners that have made the decision that there are certain communities or clientele who are underserved that they are willing to help out. They have the decision to do that. Therefore, that can translate into less moral stress and therefore less compassion fatigue, higher rates of compassion satisfaction. So really interesting research that we're seeing here demonstrating the benefits of practice ownership. Interestingly, in that particular research, there is no difference in secondary traumatic stress among practice owners or among associates. So I think those really difficult situations that we face in practice, like neglect, abuse, anything that is potentially traumatizing for individuals in the team, you're still going to be impacted as a practice owner, but there's certainly a lot of evidence to show that burnout is going to go down and compassion satisfaction is going to go up.
That sounds like a really interesting read.
Mhm.
Wow, that's really insightful and some really interesting points there.
Mhm.
Next question coming up, maybe I can throw over to you, Sarah. One of the questions that came in was, of course, I want my practice to be successful. What other key connections and relationships should I have in my entrepreneurial journey to support this goal?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ross, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. So I always just like to preface this by saying I am not an entrepreneur. So I am what is called an entrepreneur. Every day I bring my entrepreneurial mindset to work, but I do realize that as I speak to women entrepreneurs and leaders, I don't have the same challenges of risk as a true entrepreneur. As of course, I have the company resources and assets behind me to thrive. That said, from being in this role and my broad experience with the bank, I have certainly learned a lot. And I'm excited to share with you from clients that have been successful entrepreneurs. And of course, those learnings to support our up and coming entrepreneurs and leaders, of course, in the veterinary space today. So when we talk about the practice being successful and key connections and relationships, it's really about a collaboration of experts. So often entrepreneurs we see come into their space because they're extremely passionate about what they want to do, be it animal care as an example here, and they do really well in terms of growing that and showing that side of themselves. But what they may not be interested in is banking or finance or technology or marketing or all of these other components that we know go into running a successful business. So although we learn on the term entrepreneur, and that's really, the owner, the driving force, the pilot, if you, whatever term resonates most with you, it's about understanding that while you might be, driving the bus, your bus is full of everyone else who's helping you move it forward. So what does that look like? And really understanding where you are and where you want to go and who are the experts to surround yourself with to be able to do that. And I will say, finding quality services that are specific to your needs are very impactful. Again, we think of like the legal space or other professionals that really understand what you're trying to accomplish. And often not being afraid to interview different experts in their areas of expertise and finding out what fits. Be everything from personality to skill set to, again, imagine you're inviting them on your bus and who do you want to be riding along with you? Because really that's what's important here. And knowing that, again, that may change over time as your entrepreneurial journey changes, and that's okay. But always reframing to say, do I have the right group of experts here to support me while I'm leaning in on my professional expertise in my space?
Yeah, and you brought up a great point there. That fit is important as the qualifications behind those individuals as well, and that fit is really what can create that special dynamic at the end of the day. Maybe the next question is best for you, Marie. I want to own my own practice, but I'm worried that it will wreak havoc in my personal life. Is it possible for a practice owner to maintain work-life balance? That's kind of a loaded one.
It is a loaded one. I think it dovetails well off of what Sarah just said. And Sarah, I love the bus analogy. I think that's perfect because at the end of the day, your work-life balance really does or can come down to who you've got riding in that bus with you, right? How supported you are. I've worked with a lot of different veterinary practice owners in small and large mixed equine animal practice. And I see really varying degrees of work-life balance depending on the individual and how much they're willing to set those boundaries and let go of some of those things. And also really dependent upon who they have supporting them. Those who have really high functioning, trustworthy, efficient, proficient, trusted practice owners or practice managers or practice leaders tend to have more of a capacity to be able to step back. I also see a lot more possibility or potential for work-life balance among those who are co-owners. They're not doing it all alone. They're not solo associates. I think the biggest challenge I see, and it's not impossible to have, good work-life balance and thrive as a solo practice owner. It just becomes a little bit different in terms of who you lean on when you do decide to step away. So whether it is that you have like a trusted locum that you can bring in so that you can take time off, whether you work really closely with the other veterinary clinics in your community so that you can, send, patients elsewhere if that is needed. Of course, that depends as well on the type of practice that you run. But it really comes down to the planning, right? Think about who you want to be helping you along the way. We talk about being, business owners and solopreneurs, and at the end of the day, we never do this work by ourselves. I'll use the analogy for me as a solo parent. I had to think long and hard, when I decided to have my daughter, that this, I wasn't going to be able to do this alone. Who was going to be riding on that bus, that parenting bus with me, whether it's, trusted friends, colleagues, what have you. So I think at the end of the day, really thinking about what sort of a lifestyle do you want to lead? Do you want to be able to take, consistent time off or shortened days so that you can spend time with your young family if you have a young family, or so that you can travel with your partner, or so that you can just, take time off to enjoy the things that you like to do? What does that look like? And how do you see yourself and your other team members or associates or another partner fitting in on that journey to help support you to be able to maintain that work-life balance? And we can, get into the logistics of that, which I think there's several more questions that follow up to this, but I really urge you to start thinking about this from the get-go. Who is going to support me, and what sort of a life do I envision for myself? What exactly is that work-life balance, that I am envisioning?
Yeah, and that really segues well into the next question that we have, and something that I think it doesn't matter what profession you're in, challenges all of us on an everyday basis. I already feel so busy and cannot imagine owning and running my own business on top of being a practitioner. How can I best manage my time as a practice owner and a veterinarian?
Mm. Yeah, so this is where, again, in addition to leaning all the people that Sarah mentioned, delegating, right? You do not have to do it all. I think back to when my mom was a practice owner, and granted, times were very different 30, 40 years ago. Times were very different in veterinary practice 10 years ago. Um, but there has always been this, I need to do it all mentality, not just as practice owners, but I think as veterinarians. I need to fix all the species. I need to do all the surgeries. I need to be the expert in all things. And I think that time has passed. You do not have to do all of your own marketing. You do not have to build your own website. You do not have to, figure out your software program and create all of your consent forms and legal documents and all of these things and do all of your bookkeeping. I can't tell you how many weekends my mom was doing books, for the practice. You don't have to do all of that. So, think about what your passions are within the practice and where you want to focus, and what other areas that you can delegate. And I think time management is really about that delegation. It's also about utilizing a lot of tools that are really going to streamline, your efficiency on a day-to-day basis. So if you do find yourself, engaging in, meetings or, whatever it is that you have to do, we'll just call them administrative duties outside of your practice work, try to chunk that time together. Okay. So there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate that time blocking, and blocking our time is really, really helpful. Task switching and going from now I'm wearing my practice owner hat to now I'm seeing appointments and then I have to go to surgery and all these things. It's really costly from a mental bandwidth perspective and a time management perspective. So you want to carve out that time. You want to try to stay within the tasks that you are doing within that chunk, and then carve out time to do the bookkeeping if you decide to do that, or to, you know, get in touch with clients that, you know, have submitted a complaint. We hope that never happens, but, you know, all of these other duties that you would be tasked with as a practice owner, you want to make sure that you are delegating time for that and you're doing those tasks together so that you're not engaging in a lot of that task switching. And I think at the end of the day, I know for me, speaking as an entrepreneur, the sooner that you can find good help for some of these things, the better. You know, whether that's somebody, again, who's in your inbox and just like triaging things for you, or again, that you're outsourcing your marketing if you don't have somebody on your team that can do that. Just making sure that you are staying within your passions and your zones of genius. I ask myself all the time in my business, am I doing something that someone else could be doing for me, right? More efficiently or more effectively? If the answer is yes, where is that person and how do I get them to do this? You stay in your lane of what do you as a practice owner or as associate veterinarian, if you are still seeing patients and doing appointments, with which most practice owners are, staying within that zone of genius. This is, you can liken it to technician utilization, right? We don't need to be doing things that our technicians and nurses can do. Just like you as a practice owner don't need to be doing things that your lawyer or a marketing person or your practice manager could be doing. So I think that's a huge part of time management.
Yeah, and time blocking is something that I learned to do quite recently, actually. And it's amazing how much more efficient you can become. We only have one brain and two hands at any given time. And you can also look to how you would deal with your own house. If you needed a pipe fixed, you could probably fix it yourself and figure it out, and you'll spend the whole day doing it. Or you can hire a qualified plumber and they'll have it fixed for you in half an hour. Stick to what you know and where that expertise is, and surround yourself with the right people to help you along with that. Maybe even another question here, maybe for you, Sarah. It's important to me to always be learning and improving. How does mentorship fit into this, and how do I find and establish a meaningful mentorship relationship?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I think when we talk about mentorship, I always like to break down what does that really mean? And sometimes the best place to start with that is, what does it not mean? So I think when someone says, I want to go get a mentor, I would like to have a mentor, they try to envision this version of themselves, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And they're think this is the person that I need to go out and find. And that's what they have in their head. That certainly could be a mentor and a mentorship relationship. But I think when we break it down more broadly, mentorship can be about knowing what your gaps are here and now and today, and finding those resources to help fill them. So really, when we talked earlier about those experts and those connections, those are real hard skills and expertise. Mentorship is much more about the soft skills. So it's about finding people who are really excelled in those multiple different areas that perhaps you are challenged in. For instance, effective communication, managing self-care. We just talked about time blocking. Maybe you say, I want to find someone who's really good at time blocking, who can teach me how to do this. And that, with the mentorship, it doesn't need to be even necessarily one person for all things. It can be a broad grouping of people with different skill sets that, again, you are trying to excel in and accomplish. So I think when we talk about finding mentorship, we first need to turn inward and say, okay, what are my gaps? And again, this is a here and now piece. What's going to get me from here to here? And again, we go back to that bus and who's getting on and off of it. There's going to be days where there's certain experts or certain people who are really excelled in those soft skills to help you teach or help you learn. And once you have that under your belt, you know, maybe it's time for them to hop off and you're going to have somebody else hop on. So that's really, in my mind, when we're talking about mentorship, what it should perhaps look like. And when we talk about how do we find a network, this can look very various different ways. I will say, or sorry, when we talk about finding that, finding mentorship, and we think about a network, they do go hand in hand. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about a network soon. But when we're leaning into that and saying, I want to be able to have this mentor, make it easy. Know what you want and be able to verbalize it really well, to say, I am looking for someone who can help me with this. And as you begin to surround yourself with more people, again, being vocal and asking for help, it might not be Ross. I'm going to use you as an example. It might not be you, Ross, who has the skills I'm looking for, but I know that you have a group of people around you. So I may say, hey, Ross, can you help connect me with someone who would consider mentoring me in this specific thing? And the easier I can make that for you to go through your Rolodex of people in your head to say, yes, this person, the smoother that transition is going to be. So I think self-reflection, knowing what those soft skills are, and being ready to put yourself out there and ask for it in a very specific way to help people be able to help you.
Yeah, that's, I think about my 30+ year journey in the bank, and I think I've had a lot of mentors over the years who didn't even realize they were mentoring, because I picked up on something they did particularly well and adopted it as my own. Whether it be having a difficult conversation, and I liked the way they approached it. I think you probably have a little bit to say about that too, Marie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to my career and the number of mentors that have helped me. I had, of course, formal mentors during my residency and internship training program. But, to Sarah's point, it was so what is ingrained in my memory is not like the physiology they taught me, or the blood gas interpretation, or the ventilator tweaking, or whatever it was in my residency. It was those soft skills, how I was presenting myself, how I was speaking to other people in the hospital, how one thing I felt that I was really challenged with early on was like wearing my emotions on my sleeve, and how that impacted the team. So that self-awareness, that emotional intelligence, that, those communication and leadership skills. And I am so forever grateful for that. Those were, of course, those formal set relationships. So they had to be there because I was in a formal training program. What I envision, and how I often end up working with a lot of the practice owners that I do, is that they are challenged to find those mentors, right? Everybody's busy. Practice owners are busy, and, it can be difficult to find those individuals. What a lot of people have ended up leaning towards, I would say more so in the last few years, in addition to mentors, is also having a coach. So having someone where they have that relationship where they can go to them and say, look, I had this really challenging conversation with one of my team members. Can we debrief it, and how could I have handled it differently? Or I am just up to my eyeballs in stuff, and I cannot dig myself out of this hole. How can you help me with time management? Or I'm really feeling, I'm struggling to set these boundaries with my team or with my clients. Can we go through that and talk about that? So these are a lot of the things that come up. And if you can find the coach that really has that skill set and can assist you with that, similar to finding these mentors, I think that's another really good option. I wanted to also touch on Valerie's comment in the chat. She mentioned, I have this fear about delegating all these things and how that's going to affect profitability. And I think, Ross, you touched on this, and I really want to iterate this to Valerie, because I had the same concerns early on as an entrepreneur. Well, I'm barely making enough money to pay my own salary. If I start paying somebody else to do all this stuff, it's just money going out, and they're not bringing money in necessarily. And I think it's a little bit of a mindset shift, right? We need to recognize, to your analogy, Ross, if you are spending a whole day figuring something out that is not in your wheelhouse, it is not your area of expertise, whether it's fixing a pipe at home, or whether it's doing a software overhaul, or fixing a broken printer that you could be hiring an IT person to do, or figuring out a marketing plan that you could be hiring a marketing person to do. At the end of the day, it comes down to how much is your time worth. Your time as a practicing
100%.
Yeah, your time as a practicing veterinarian, think about the money that you can make seeing an appointment or doing a surgery or, those types of things. If you are trading that precious income generating time to do these things that you could 100% be paying somebody else to do for less money, that's just kind of a more objective way to look at it. And from a less objective way to look at it, what I would urge you to do is to think of yourself as the CEO of your business. I know practice owners, we think of ourselves, I'm just a veterinarian who owns this practice, but that's not true. You are the CEO, you are the visionary of the practice. You need to have time carved out for you to think about, how do I see my practice growing? What sort of team members do I want to have on? I'm having a challenge with these two team members. How am I going to fix that? What sort of new skill set or new equipment services do I want to bring into my practice? You need to carve out time for you to sit in the seat of CEO in your work. And yes, that might not seem like money generating either, but I promise you that it is. If you want to have that time carved out for yourself, you have to let go of some of these other things. And at the end of the day, if you know that you're spending more time on something that you could be doing other more income generating things on, then for me, that's an easy, hard no. That needs to go off to somebody else. So I hope that helps, Valerie. And
Yeah,
Ross.
and that dovetails 100% back to work-life balance as well, because that delegation and bringing in a team to surround you, going right back to Sarah's comment about those people you want on the bus with you, that allows you to be able to balance your time between yourself and your family and your professional practice at the end of the day. So that
If I
probably
can,
leads,
could
yeah,
I touch on
please,
that one
Sarah.
too a little bit too? So yeah, I appreciate that delegation is very challenging. I think it's something that we hear from a lot of people. And I think Marie, you touched on the business case very well as to why it shouldn't be you necessarily doing it. But I think there's also a business case to be said as to why it should be those other people. We know that autonomy, feeling for most people, feeling autonomous in their role is a huge part of workplace culture and a huge piece of keeping people at an organization. So when you get, again, consider the cost of retention and turnover and the value of being able to provide people an autonomous scope of responsibility, it truly does add to the bottom line, again, in a long run perspective. An entrepreneur, woman entrepreneur who I recently met with, I asked her this very similar question around getting comfortable with delegation. And she said she will trust her people until they give her a reason not to. And it was her game-changing mindset that really helped with that. So again, just a little bit of more food for thought there around the power of delegating once we can get around that mindset shift.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. Um, Marie, is it possible to maintain healthy boundaries when you own your own practice?
It is possible, and it's not easy. I don't think boundaries are easy for anybody in our profession. We are all inherently caregivers, people pleasers. We want to help. Many of us too have this real fear of, what are people going to think? What will my clients think if I'm not available, on the weekend? Or what will my team members think if, whatever it might be. And I think it's really important to put that aside. This is definitely, I think, one of the biggest challenges of the practice owners whom I work with, in that there is this fear of setting boundaries. And I think the fear, again, once we can get past that and the boundary is set, I think the next thing that always comes up is this guilt, right? Okay, so now I got past the fear and I set the boundary, and now I feel horrible. And people come to me and they say, okay, I know what I have to do. I know what boundaries I have to set, and I set them. How do I stop myself from feeling guilty? And the reality is that you don't. That guilt never goes away. The important thing is to recognize that if you're feeling guilty, that's a good thing, because it means you're human and you care. Only the narcissists in the room are not going to feel guilty in setting a boundary. So it's okay to feel guilty. The way that we push past that is to recognize the why behind our boundaries. And I've seen this in a lot of practitioners, especially solo practitioners, that are just burning the candle at both ends. They're not setting boundaries. They're doing everything for everybody. They're not taking time off. They're not saying no. And then they're showing up at work short with their team members, short with their clients, cranky because they're not enjoying themselves. They're feeling burnt out and exhausted. And it has been a game changer for them when they can recognize, I need to set these boundaries to show up as the best version of myself in this practice ownership role or in this associate role or whatever it is. So this is what I need to do. And, for me, it's the same thing in my life, right? I don't like to say no to people, and I don't like to be, the one always setting the boundaries. And at the same time, I know what happens if I don't. I get short with my daughter. I get snappy with my team at work. I start to make mistakes. I don't deliver in the best way that I could be. And so then I come back to my why. Okay, right? This is reminding me again, this is why this is important. So short answer, yes, it is possible. And yes, you will feel guilty, and you push through that guilt by harnessing your why.
Yeah, and I think every single one of us is challenged with that. And I don't think it even really is that important if you're a business owner or not, or what profession you're in. I think we're all very much challenged by that. And that's some real words of wisdom. Now, Sarah, maybe I can put it back to you. We were talking a lot about mentorship and other similar things, but what about networking? How does somebody build a network, and why is it important as a woman in the veterinary profession?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of the how, step one is certainly, like most things, prioritizing it. So carving out the time to actually find a network. And I would say too, before you go into a space of wanting to say, I'm going to go build this network, know what you have to offer. So I think it's important to distinguish the difference between a network connection and that mentorship connection, where the mentorship is much more around them adding value to you. And that's the expectation that has been set. When we talk about a network, it's much more reciprocal. Ross, I'm going to pick on you again because you're in my screen here, but I would like to connect with you. Here's what I'm really good at, and here's where I think I could add value, or here's the experiences I've had. I'd love to hear about yours, and perhaps we can find ways of a connection there. So I think, first of all, that internal reflection is step one, and then being ready to pay it forward as well. We talked again about being able to ask for help. Maybe there's someone within, when you're meeting those connections, that you can then introduce someone else to. So always being aware. But I understand tangible steps are helpful. So what does it really look like? So going out and looking for the network. So attending events, be it virtual, this is a very good example of one. I know that there's various associations within the veterinary space. I'm not going to name them because you'll be more familiar with me, and knowing that we're in a national scope here, there can be geography to consider, but I know these organizations are generally very easy to find. And then going with purpose. So again, even I'll use today's example, or today as an example, knowing, what do you want to get out of this? Why did you carve this time out today to be here? What do you want to learn? Who do you want to connect with? We've got our chat going with the opportunity to share information for those you want to stay connected with, but really going with that purpose. And then asking for the connection. So saying, don't just leave it at that handshake. Say, I would like to be someone in your network. I believe that we have value to offer one another. Following up, diarizing to stay connected. Again, I know we have 17 million things on the go at one time, but when we talk about that time blocking, once a month, let's put aside 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, send as many emails as you can to your network to say, hey, it's been a little while. I would love to chat for 10 minutes. And you could say that could be as simple as to check in on how you're doing. But one of the great benefits of a network, especially if you establish that reciprocal relationship, is that they can almost become an accountability partner to really help you push forward. So when you're finding that time to connect, I'd love to hear how it went with hiring your new marketing manager. I'd love to hear about how you're finding the delegation going. Like, what are those little bits of pieces, and likewise that they can hold you accountable to as well. So knowing what you have to offer, and then going with purpose. are two kind of step ones. And then why is it important? So again, we look to some of those softer pieces, I would say, of entrepreneurship when we ask, like, why is this important? Everything, again, a great way to find a mentor, but also collaboration. Like when you're looking for someone, say you want to buy a second practice, and you say, I want to find someone who's done this and we can talk about it with, or maybe they're going through it too, and you want to have someone to navigate that with. It can also greatly contribute to social well-being. So again, we know that venting is a big part of mental health, and having people that speak your language, so you can call them up and, you know, have that session of getting things off your chest without having to explain every little piece to bring them into your world. They're already there with you. And then of course, an exchange of ideas. So we leaned on that a little bit. Boosting your confidence. You might walk into an event not really, knowing anyone, and you walk away with 3 more connections that are in your world. And the more comfortable that you get with that, the more confident you are in not just your skills as a practice owner, but in being in that veterinary ecosystem and being in that space and leaning in and saying, yes, I belong here. This is where I'm going to excel. And of course, expanding visibility. So being able to showcase the work that you're doing, the value that you're adding in your community, and what that can look like. So I will say too, we know, you heard at the beginning, my role as our regional manager of women in enterprise, we know that networking is a huge piece that can be much more challenging for women, even by the time of day that events often happen at. But we also know it is a piece that is very important to be able to support that growth. I can even type it in the chat, but we do have different resources, organizations that we've worked with who offer fantastic networking. To name a few, the Forum, Corliss, Movement 51. I can certainly, again, give a link to those. But just leaning in and exploring what is out there, because I will say it is a huge piece of being able to not only to feel successful in the practice that you've built from perhaps a financial standpoint, but feeling successful in your career and feeling a part of an environment when you are in an entrepreneurial space that can often feel a lot more like, you're alone on that island. So I hope that's helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, please do. Very helpful. Please do share those resources. I think people will get a lot of interest in that, definitely. Now, we had some other questions that came in through the registration. Maybe I can throw this out to both you, Marie, you, Sarah, and maybe you as well, Nancy. What is the time commitment involved per week during the first few years of starting a new business? And that's a bit of a broad one, but yeah, thoughts.
This is a tough question to answer. And, I think it comes down to how you've set yourself up in your new business. It's a really hard thing to predict. I mean, let's be honest, life is hard to predict. Like anything can change, right? One of your team members might move away and, something might be delayed with the building process. If you're building a new practice, whatever it is, like there's so many unknowns. And I think this just reinforces the theme that has kind of woven throughout here is what sort of support system have you set up for yourself? I think if you can set up a really strong support system, then hopefully the time commitment will be a reasonable one. I think also, to Sarah's point that was just made about having this network of other, practice owners who are in the same space as you, having conversations about what their experience has been or what they are feeling their time commitment is. I know for the practice owners that I work with, their time really kind of goes in ebbs and flows, right? Like there will be weeks that there's like a multitude of things going on that really require their involvement as the practice owner. And there will be other weeks where they're just kind of coasting along and doing their veterinarian duties. And there's not a whole lot of extra stuff that is needed. There's going to be times of year that are more challenging, just like the veterinary caseload shifts from year to year. And there are going to be days and weeks that are more challenging. So I think it's a little bit hard to predict, but you can imagine that there will be additional time outside of your duties as a veterinarian, especially if you have not carved out hours or days within your week to tackle some of those other duties, right? If you just say that I'm going to work 5 days a week and then I'm going to do the, ownership stuff in the evenings or on the weekends, you're going to feel very tapped out. And maybe that's okay in the short term. You definitely don't want that to be a long-term plan. You want to be setting up those supports so that you can have that, time and space, as we said before, for that work-life balance. I'm
Yeah, that's got to be a bit of an evolution there as time
yes.
goes on and you learn what you need to do, making those conscious decisions to going back to time blocking and things like that to make sure it isn't a 24-hour day all-encompassing affair when it could be done differently. Sorry, I think I might have interrupted you there, Marie.
Oh, no, that's okay, Ross. I wanted to also mention, to Sarah's point, just how important this networking aspect is. We have so many opportunities to network when we go to conferences. And I think because most of us as veterinarians are on the introverted side, we don't take advantage of those opportunities. I'm glad to see that there are more conferences like the Veterinary Leadership Conference that the AVMA puts on, and some other ones that have dedicated networking time. And so it can feel overwhelming to be like, I don't want to go to this networking thing. Like, that's just way too, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like you can't predict how it's going to go. It's very ambiguous. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
But if you can go into it with this goal of, I want to connect with at least 2 other female practice owners and exchange information. I joined a mastermind a couple of years ago when I was looking to, introduce some changes into my business. And I connected with a couple of women in that group who are also entrepreneurs, business owners, coaches, consultants. We have a lot of things in common. And we set up a group chat that is still going strong years later. And we connect within that group chat once a week. We share voice notes with each other. We pop in. It's like, oh my gosh, I had this issue with this team member of mine. How do you suggest that I handle it, or anything? And it has just been so empowering to know, to Sarah's point, that you are not alone. Business owners of any kind, but I think especially veterinary practice owners, feel so alone. Despite there being so many other practices around and so many other business owners, we feel like we are working on an island. So get rid of that feeling as quickly as you can. Set up these groups and don't be afraid to use them. Use them in a way, use sounds like a bad word, but stay connected, stay open, share. The more you share, the more they'll be willing to share. And it can be a very reciprocal and supportive situation. So that's just what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, and it can also help improve mental health if you're realizing that other people within your network suffer those same challenges you do. You at least feel like you're not alone, and you can look at other people's ways they've dealt with it or their points of view on it or what have you, which probably leads perfectly into the next question that was submitted to us. What are the top 3 things you can do as a new business owner to improve your mental health?
Well, I am definitely interested to hear from our hive mind here as to what everybody else thinks. When I think about mental health specifically, there are definitely some proven, research-backed things that are going to be very, very helpful. There's things that we can do for ourselves, right? So the first one of those is you have to be getting enough sleep. There's a lot of solid research to show when we are not sleeping enough, mental health is one of the first things that is impacted. So this is where boundaries come into play. It is not going to be sustainable for your mental health to be working until the wee hours of the night and then just flop into bed and fall asleep and have a restful sleep, right? So yes, you're probably going to have some, things that you need to do in the evening, whether that's family, personal related, whether that's business related. Set some sort of a boundary in the form of an alarm that goes off half an hour before you expect to be in bed so that you can shut it down, electronics go away, and you can start winding down and mentally letting the day's things go. To that sake, along those same lines, mindfulness is a really, really helpful strategy for boosting mental health. So this is really that present minded focus where you can recognize like the feelings in your body, the sensations. How am I feeling? Am I stiff? Am I sore? Am I tight? What do I need physically? The thoughts that are coming up for you, maybe there's a conversation with a team member that's just playing out over and over and over. we don't want to ruminate on that, but we want to recognize it and then ask ourselves, what is this telling me? Like, do I need to have a conversation tomorrow, or how do I need to address this? And then also recognizing our feelings, right? Are we feeling like we are overextended? Are we feeling frustrated about something? Are, whatever it is, those, especially those feelings of frustration, exhaustion, overwhelm, being taken advantage of, those are signs that we need to set a boundary, right? So tuning into those, being mindful to what your present experience is, not dwelling on the future or getting anxious about the future, and not ruminating on the past, that is going to be really very helpful for your mental health. And then at the end of the day, well, I mean, I could go on and on. There's exercise, there's getting outside, there's all of these tools that help. And I think one of the best things is to always have another professional on your bus, which is a mental health professional, right? So tapping into the resources that you have available through your provincial veterinary medical organization or your benefits, to know that you can connect with somebody who can give you that unbiased, expert, targeted, evidence-based advice for whatever it is that you're feeling challenged to work through. I know for me, the last 10 years, I would not be where I am today without the various counselors and therapists I've worked with over the years for varying different reasons. Sometimes it's perfectionism that I'm really struggling with. Sometimes it is those boundaries that I'm feeling challenged to communicate. Sometimes it's the imposter syndrome that pipes up. But having a trusted mental health professional is going to be helpful as well. And I really want to hear what everybody else, what's helped you and others who you've worked with.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw
I
my
can
2
add.
cents. Yeah, no, please go ahead, Sarah.
I'm going first.
I love it.
So I first of all, I agree with everything you said, Marie. And I wanted to come back to some of the pieces we hear just around like the overwhelm really being a big part, and more kind of technical strategies to help manage that. And I think this ties well to some of the stuff we've talked earlier, but we tend to underestimate, and I mean like we as all of us, how much we can get done in a day, and we overestimate what we can get done in a day and underestimate what we can do on a longer scale, a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So I think when we talk about managing mental health and not wanting to feel overwhelmed or guilty that we haven't done enough or that we can never catch up, I think we also need to, from the professional, the business standpoint, understand what is realistic. So some good ways to do that, like we talked about time blocking, but actually figuring out our calendar for the day and really saying like, how long are all of these things going to take, and knowing that this to-do list isn't realistic for today, so don't plan on getting it all done. And I think some other tactics in there can be saying like, okay, what are the top 3 things that need to happen today, and if those get done, I'm going to say it was a good day. I mean, I know we're kind of in the more like starting up a business phase, but anyone who maybe dealt with kids homeschooling during COVID and trying to do their own business may have sort of realized when we really need to prioritize, we can. So again, what are those 3 things, and be able to sleep at night knowing that those 3 got done if nothing else got done. I'd also say too, planning contingency time in the calendar. So as business owners, as leaders, don't block every single second of your day. Also make time to eat, and, bio breaks in there too, but give yourself time to deal with, that customer on the phone who's furious about something that now is going to interrupt, and you're going to need to shuffle your day, and sort of have these tactics in place. The last one I would say too is, instead of focusing on, I use the term to-do list, but really I prefer to call it a results list. So what are you trying to accomplish, as opposed to what are all of these overwhelming tasks, and knowing again, once that result is done, as opposed to all of these to-do list items. And then couple little things, the to-do list is never going to go away. The email inbox is never going to be empty. So give yourself realistic expectations so that you can really feel that you're doing a good job. And I'll wrap it up there. Ross, your turn.
Yeah, no worries. You actually said a lot of almost exactly what I was going to say, other than my favorite way to deal with when I just get to that point in the day is I grab my dog and I just want to be alone and go for a nice long walk and come back and get right back at it. And I find just that 15, 20-minute, half-hour reset does wonders for me. And I saw you had yourself off of mute there too, Nancy. Maybe I can get you to throw your 2 cents in.
Yeah, no, I think, COVID was kind of, I guess, a lesson learned for myself, where all of the stuff that everybody's kind of mentioned, overwhelming and, being kind of isolated and, all of that. So what I found helpful was to kind of be able to connect with people and have, satisfaction to learn new things, instead of, finding things that I could do differently and being present in the moment. And, this to-do list always gets up on us and you feel super overwhelmed. It's like I'm never getting sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, right? So having that is, some type of, embracing the gratitudeness of every day. What we do is important. Mind you, yoga and mindfulness and meditation helps, and it truly does. When you kind of, like Marie touched on it, set an alarm clock if you need to just say, if that bell goes off, you're step away, please. So
You're
those are little
done.
things that you do, and you that's that half an hour, right, that you take, whether it's the outdoor walk or a little bit of the social connect with whoever you just kind of let it out with. And I think that it just brings it all back together, and you're rejuvenated to kind of go back and do things more efficiently and effectively. So I think its support system is very, very important, just as much as taking care of your own self and making sure that you know that you've done your best throughout the day, and ensuring that there's a capacity that you and your body and your mind can take, and that you need to go back and just take time to yourself to reconnect, is also just as important.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough few years. I'm so happy we came out the other side.
Yeah.
We still have, we're running out of time. We still have so many questions that were submitted in from the group, which I love. Marie, staff management insight, how to create boundaries with staff while avoiding negative reactions. I know we touched on that a little bit, or you had touched on it, but maybe a little bit of insight there.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one. This is, even for me as a leader, as a critical care specialist or ER doctor working within a team, there's those boundaries. Like, we want to maintain that professional relationship, and we want to show our team that we care about them and we connect with them. And I've seen a lot of practice owners do this very well, where they do have boundaries, and it all comes down to communication. This is what we expect. If you are going to be calling out sick, this is how you communicate with me. If you need to reach me and it's an emergency, you call me. If you need to reach me, or if you need to just share information with me and this is not urgent or emergent, it comes to me in an email, not a text message at 11 o'clock at night. So I think we can definitely set those boundaries. And this is a lot of work that I do with teams, to have these conversations, to come together as a team and decide, what is everybody comfortable with? What boundaries are we going to set around communication on our days off, days on, what to expect? So I think if from the get-go you set these expectations and you set them with the intention of making sure that everyone has that work-life balance, and that everyone has an opportunity to step away from their work at some point or another, whether they're an owner, an associate, or an employee, it can be done, and it can be done very effectively by not, burning bridges or breaking down any of those relationships. So it definitely is possible.
Excellent, excellent. And that's something I find working with healthcare professionals. The bank keeps me busy during the day, but very often healthcare professionals are so busy they only have a chance to speak in the evening, which could potentially lead to working 24 hours a day. So often I'll block off 2 days a week and say, I'm not available tonight, but we can chat Tuesday. How does 8 o'clock sound once you're off your shift? And that allows you to build that balance together, and creates a boundary and an expectation for whether it be employees or clients, is when you are available and when you're not available. And people, most people do respect that. A couple more real quick ones. How do I own a house call practice and schedule time off and still thrive, Marie?
Yeah, I think this is a hard question, whether or not you own a house call practice or not. The work as a practice owner is never done. The work as an entrepreneur is never done. Anybody who owns a business, I always joke, I went from my like 9 to 5, faculty position to being an entrepreneur 24/7. I think that it all still comes down to those boundaries, to that planning, to what you envision for yourself. What does thriving look like to you? Like, be specific. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean you're going to take X number of weeks off per year? Does that mean you're going to take so many days off per week? What does that look like, and how can we set you up for that? And again, communicating that with your team. I've worked with and known a lot of palliative care veterinarians who own their own practice. They're going into people's homes. They're being called sometimes at all hours if things take a turn for the worse, or if they're being called in to perform a euthanasia. So it is up to them from the get-go to set these expectations about what situations they will be able to be available for outside of hours, of regular hours or appointments, and what situations don't. And in the event that they are not available, here's who you can call, and here are the steps that you can take. So again, what do you need to thrive? What does that mean for your business? And how do we set you and your clients up for success? Communicating that so that there aren't any, feelings of disgruntlement or surprise if you happen to not be available. So again, I promise you, I've seen it done very well, and I've seen it not impact businesses negatively at all. Clients really respect that. They just need to know in advance what they can expect.
Now, we had one last pre-submitted question, and I know we're out of time. Marie, is that one that you may want to take offline? It was a very specific question around managing on-call duties and burnout, and concrete step-by-step plans and specifics around that. Maybe that one is best left for you to take offline.
You know what, I'm
I'll
going to
let you comment on that, or hit it really quickly.
Yeah, super happy for this individual to reach out to me one-on-one. And what I will say is this: for those of us who spend time on call, I spent 50% of my time as a faculty member on call. And I made the mistake of, when I was on call, I wouldn't make any plans. I wouldn't do anything else. I would just hang out at work in case I was called. That is not good work-life balance. What you want to do when you are on call is, as best you can, still live your life. Obviously, you can't go out and party and be 2 hours away and unable to be accessible, so obviously within reason. But the biggest thing about thriving while on call is that when you are not on call, that is the time that you are so diligent with your boundaries. When you are not on call, you are not available. Here are the steps that someone would need to do should they need help, right? What I see too often is individuals who spend some time on call and some time not on call. Even when they're not on call, they're available. And that's not conducive to that work-life balance. We need, as medical professionals, some time carved out when we are not doing work, thinking about work, planning for work. Your brain has to have that off time. So you must create those boundaries around the time that you are not on call to preserve it, so that you can fully show up and be present when you are on call. And happy to expand on that more any other time.
Excellent, excellent. I do appreciate that answer. Just a reminder, everybody, that the session is being recorded, and we are going to send that out for everybody's reference. We do have another one on transitioning out of practice that is coming up on June the 5th, the same time slot in the lunch hour. So if you're interested in that or know anybody that is, please pass along the details to them and have them register for it. Our information will also be available, and we're going to disseminate that should you want to get in touch with any one of us to ask any specific questions, need help with anything, whether it's banking, mental health, networking, whatever the case may be. And really appreciate everybody's time today, and do not hesitate to reach out if you want to go a little bit deeper on something that came up. We missed a core question or concept that you would like a little bit of help with. And thank you so much, everybody, for your time today, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much, everybody. And thank you, Ross, so much for your moderation, and
My
Nancy,
pleasure.
so much for your moral support and for being here as well. This was a great conversation.
Fantastic.
rest
Have a
of your
great
day,
day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.